My interest in creativity was sparked simply by my curiosity, and I attended my first SIPSI in 1964 and have been participating in 36 since that time. My preparation, my professional preparation, was in mathematics. I have 3 degrees in math, but I have been emphasizing the study of creativity because I've been just totally sold on it since I was first exposed to it in 1964. My primary purpose in going to SIPSI was to become a better math teacher. I knew that there were things that I didn't know about, and I found them in my first SIPSI as something that I really wasn't looking for. But I just knew through the other part of me, the non-mathematical part of me, which was always music, that there had to be something better than, or in accompanying this left brain orientation which I had always had. I taught at the University of Buffalo for 2 years and obtained my master's degree in teaching of mathematics in secondary school, and then joined the Navy. It was during wartime, during World War II, not the Civil War, and I just decided that my capabilities in math could be applied to military defense, but unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I was assigned then to the Radio Research Laboratory at Harvard University, which is was then the sponsoring agency for the sequence-controlled calculator that had become very newsworthy at that particular time. It was a huge calculator, and I was assigned to be a programmer. So essentially, I was the second woman programmer in the United States. While I was at Harvard, my mentor, and I have had mentors throughout my educational experiences, my mentor was Grace Hopper. So when I discovered creativity, it was a whole new world to me. It opened a new world to me. And I became then a practitioner in creativity and have enjoyed every minute of it. One of the other things that I felt we might talk about was something that I had already mentioned before, and that was the formula for creativity. All right, the definition, and I'm sure that Sid and Ange and I discussed this before I put it in an actual equation form, because we talked about, and we used to have a lot of opportunities to just discuss things. The 3 of us were co-directors of SIPSI for many years, and we took the opportunity to discuss things in, as it were, in committee, although we never thought about ourselves being a committee. So I'm sure that we discussed the fact that creativity is defined in terms of the 3 variables, knowledge, imagination, and evaluation, but I, in my mathematical way, decided that it would be creativity as, is this big enough? A function of knowledge, imagination, and evaluation, with no coefficients to say creativity equals A times K plus plus, and I don't know whether it's a plus. I don't think we can define whether or not it's a plus. But this functional notation simply says that creativity is in terms of knowledge, imagination, and evaluation, with the subscript of A for attitude. And I firmly believe that positivism begets positivism and negativism begets negativism. And that has come back and back to me many times in my work in mentoring. So there isn't any opportunity to say it's three times knowledge or 3 knowledges and 5 imaginations. They're just not concepts that can be put in those mathematical terms. But we go further to say that our knowledge is obtained through all of our senses. That's why it's so important to develop our senses and to use our senses. We all have 5 substantial senses. Many of us have 6 senses, but we don't really use them. We don't take advantage of all that we have in our capability. And that's one of the reasons why we have emphasized something like this equation, to have people realize that they gain knowledge through the senses. And they look at something, but they don't really see it. They listen to something, but they don't really hear it. So if we can help ourselves, this is a part of what I've described to other faculties, to say that we teach people techniques, and this is one of the excellent applications of that we emphasize that people look at things more carefully, listen to things more carefully. Even your sense of smell and your sense of taste can be interpreted in a very deeper way. You may understand, because you smell something, that it refers you or reminds you of something else. And one of the definitions of creativity is making connections. And that's one of the reasons that we make connections. Well, then, in imagination, we're talking about what we do with that knowledge. We're talking about the manipulation of that knowledge to get more connections, to make more connections. And with our sense, we realize what those connections are. And then evaluation is important, because I believe that we are not doing change for change's sake. We have some reason for the changes that we make. Therefore, we evaluate in terms of what's good about it, or what could be better about it. So that the 3 variables come in, but as I say, I still can't tell you how many parts of K and how many parts of I and how many parts of E. But always, hopefully, I think, through a positive attitude. So that's the reason why I developed this formula, which is still being used, I understand. And these are the variables: the knowledge, imagination, and evaluation are those elements which make up creativity. There are many other ways of looking at creativity, but that gives some credence, I think, to some of the more left-brain people who want to see it. They don't want just nebulous terminology, but they want to see it in black and white. So that's a black and white. Another thing which I had not mentioned before was the fact that in 1977, I believe, I had a sabbatical. I had not had one in many years of teaching. I had not requested one. I had never really felt that it was necessary. But there came a time when on the phone nearly every day people were saying to me, I would like to come to the Institute, but I can't get the time off, or I can't get the funding, or some reason why they couldn't come to Buffalo. So the question was, don't you have something that explains what goes on at SIPSI? Well, up to that point, we had had instructional material, but nothing simple, nothing that was easily read. And so as a sabbatical project, I wrote a little 48-page book, which was called Scratching the Surface of Creative Problem Solving, a Bird's Eye View of CPS. And that became a classic. People are still telling me how much they still use that little book. People would buy it either for an introduction to creative problem solving, or to be used during a workshop, or as a good final survey. And I've been told that that was really the only place that the definition of creative problem solving was ever published so that the general public would know what we were doing. But I feel that that's one of my contributions that I wrote as a sabbatical project. The first really simple, understandable approach to creative problem solving. And it's the sort of thing that children could read as well as adults. And I've been told many, many times how valuable it is because of the simplicity of reading it. One of the things that I remember Scott's mentioning so seriously the other day, he said that they always in their workshops in this country and other countries, and he's become very popular, very successful as a world practitioner throughout the world. And he was showing me some of the materials that they use in other countries. And he said, you see this word critique? He said, that is because when you were instructing us and we were doing the facilitator training, that we always gave feedback and had a critiquing session. And he said that has become a part of our business now. We couldn't function without that critiquing session, in which after an experience, the members of the participating group would give feedback to the leaders, and then they would critique that to decide what is positive, what is negative, what should we keep, what can we throw out. And he said, without your training in the undergraduate and the graduate programs, I never would have realized the importance of the critiquing to continually improve whatever is being offered in the sessions. So he said, we use it every time we have a workshop. And I don't know whether they're still using it in the instructional program, but...
Well, we use something called debrief. Is it the same?
That's the same thing. The debriefing is the same as the critiquing. It's very hard to separate what I did from what Sid did, because Ange Biondi thought that Sid and I were kind of like two peas in a pod, and he told me many years later that I was just so used to working with Sid because we would anticipate what the other one would say. And I honestly don't know whether this is something that either we worked out together or I worked out and then he took it over, or vice versa. But when I was continuing as the co-director, and then when I became the director, I emphasized it more than ever. And I know now that it is a serious part of a business arrangement when people are paying thousands of dollars to participate in a program. They get the debriefing as a technique. They get the critiquing, which is essentially the same thing. Well, I think the feedback is so important, because how do you know whether you've been successful or not?
Right.
And it's in the feedback that you find out what has gone on from the point of view of the participant and from the point of view of the facilitator. And you put that all together and you get something better the next time.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt that it was really critical. I found that math became easier for me after I understood how creativity could come into the picture. So I was always very happy to encourage my students to go into math, although most of them were reluctant. Nobody ever seems to want to take math courses unless they've kind of grown up in it. And I guess that's what I did. And it was very enlightening for me to be able to share my love of math with some of the students who previously had not been interested in it at all. And creativity students, I found, then became more interested in it because they could see other connections. They had been taught, in many cases, simply to memorize formulas, and I always emphasized working out the formulas. Maybe it's because my memory has never been as good as I would like it to be, but I always loved it. I think that's why I appreciated the process, because I could always work it out. And in that sense, it was mathematical. And I've always loved puzzles of any kind. And in creative problem solving, you start with a perplexity. And it's a puzzle to work out. So it's almost natural for me, and I had to try to indicate to other people how that could be a natural for them. And I still feel that the process is a natural process. I will always be grateful to Alex Osborne for putting this down in some terminology that we could work with, because that's the way it has appealed to me. And I think it would be a shame if we ever really got away from that process. That's why I think quality control is so necessary